Hello and welcome to another Studio Sundays. I'm your host, Gianna Andrews. We are hanging out in my art studio. Today is Sunday, and Sundays are the day to relax, reset, get ready for your big week ahead. So, why not listen to some inspiring people while you're working on your meal prep, you're planning your outfits, maybe you're doing laundry, cleaning the house? It's time for another Studio Sunday Spotlight. This week, I was super excited to chat with Chris Giuseppini. Chris has a super interesting story of how he got to where he is. Chris also has a really interesting YouTube channel based on conventional living. His channel is growing quickly, so definitely check that out. Link in the show notes. But not only did I learn a lot from Chris's story, but he also gave me some consulting advice on my own business. His perspective is that if you stick with one thing long enough, you become a master in it. It's okay if competition joins the scene because those people are just copycats. And the more you just stick with what you're good at and keep refining yourself, the better you're going to get and the better you'll stand out from your competition. But yeah, there was just a lot of gold in there. So I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did. And with that, let's dive into it. Chris, welcome to Studio Sundays. Happy to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Where are you at right now? What state are you in?
I'm in New Jersey, about 20 minutes outside of New York City.
Okay.
I've been here my entire life.
And you went to school in New Jersey as well, I saw?
Yeah, I went to film school at Montclair State University, graduated, and basically have continued to be a storyteller ever since. And that's just been my trajectory. Had a relationship with creating YouTube videos, and then took my passion to helping uncover stories from people that didn't know they had it in order to help them progress their careers. And so that would be like an entrepreneur or business owner, and I'd help them leverage video and extract the stories from within themselves that they didn't know was that interesting, and it helped attract them a tribe and an audience, and then in turn um, help their business out.
Yeah, that's super interesting because there's different ways to start businesses almost. It's like some businesses start with the product or what they're selling and then they need that story to like kind of attract those customers or connect with people. I feel like I did it the opposite way where I like started telling my story and then all of a sudden people were like, "We want to buy your stuff." And I was like, "I don't even have a website." So it's interesting like how the difference can happen there. Before we dive too far into like what you're doing today, what was your childhood like? What's the story or kind of like the thread in your childhood that kind of almost like supersede where you're at now?
Yeah, there are. Um, my dream as a kid was to be a football coach. And I went to like Barnes and Noble and got like every kind of football book that I could get, just random things like the football coaching Bible, like textbooks on strategy in football. And I would gather the kids in my neighborhood, and I would take, pieces of paper and draw like blocks, and we would plays and stuff like that. And we would run these plays, just five of us. And I loved doing that because it was a collaborative process, and it was like an organized thing where a lot of people were operating at the same time to complete a task. In retrospect, I recognize that's what it was. Back then, I loved football. Um, as I grew older and I started to play football, I realized it wasn't for me because at least in the um, at least when I grew up or where I grew up, and I guess many places, youth league football is very unorganized and macho and not as strategic as I had been reading in my books. And I'm sure at the higher levels it changes, but it's like kids tackling kids and intense male, aggressiveness. And I was like, okay, this isn't for me. So luckily around that time, um, my cousins who were big into like 80s horror references and stuff like that, they started like during like family holidays make like movies in the basement, like just little skits, like recreating movie scenes and stuff like that. And that made me fall in love with making movies because, again, here's a collaborative process where a bunch of people get together, actors, lights, stuff like that. And we didn't do any of that. We just filmed ourselves on a home movie camera, but it was the same feeling. And then I took that and ran with it into high school.
So you ran with that into high school. Is that when you kind of like got into filmmaking and started getting behind a camera more?
In high school, my program and high school, well, my high school had a really great investment into like the arts and extracurricular activities. So like I was very, very blessed because even others that I grew up in the state that went to other high schools that I met in like college, they didn't have what I had access to. And one of the things that they invested heavily into was like a media thing where we would have a morning show and morning announcements and stuff like that. But each Friday we would create like a Good Morning America type of thing with like uh, it showed with different segments, whether it's like man on the street interviews or skits and things like that. And I got again really into that, and I became like a producer of this show as I got more experience and grew up in high school. And it was like, hey, we have a schedule, we have a team, we have all this stuff. Um, and I knew that I wanted to go to college for filmmaking. My senior year, as I was deciding to go to school, my media teacher was also the tech person, the tech supervisor of like the school's play. And he asked me, I had like a lot of free time senior year because I was just like chilling because I knew what I had wanted to do. So I was like doing as little credits as I could and stuff like that. Um, he asked me if I wanted to be a part of like his tech crew. And he said, he's got his established people. If you just want to be extra hands and like learn the ropes in live performance, let me know. I said, yeah, let's go. Um, I I show up to the first like tech rehearsal for the school play, which that year was Les Mis. Crazy, crazy ambitious play to start my experience with it as my first play that I've ever seen, my first musical that I've ever seen.
Wow.
Um, and first half hour we're like setting up lights, miking people up, all that stuff. Then I'm sitting just in the audience because I have nothing to do because I'm just like extra hands. I'm not anything important, and I'm just watching. And then the overture comes. There's a live band, and like that Les Mis is an epic, and it just caught me completely off guard. Like the level of talent at that school was crazy because I knew people could sing, but I didn't. The mix between this epic story, the talented kids, the live music, and all of these creative lighting, everything had to come together to make this. And I'm the audience member of one first day of tech rehearsal, and I'm for the first 7 minutes until the director paused it and yelled at some error. I was just completely enthralled in that, and I realized that in that moment, football in my life, um, filmmaking in my life, and theater, it all stems back to the same thing of that teamwork to create something that would not otherwise exist. And that's kind of what my backstory is, I would say.
Wow, that's super interesting. So in this scenario, are the actors actually like mic'd up? Is
Yeah, it's
okay.
a full on
It's a full
rehearsal
production.
live band.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like and this is like my first day on the job. The only musical I ever saw was probably like Sound of Music on TV. I was not a theater kid, and then from there I became one. you
Yeah.
know, and
You were a football jock and that converted
yeah,
to
and I
a theater
transitioned
kid.
into a nerdy film kid, and then I became a theater kid, and so
We definitely did not have we had a lot of theater in my school and musicals, but we never had like a media team with a like we never had mics, none of that. So that's super interesting that
mm,
you're able to experience that at
yeah,
that young age.
my school really they spent on that production, like $120,000. Like that was
Wow.
like the budget that was going around. Like to get the rights to Les Mis, I remember it was like 25 grand to just get the rights to put that on.
Wow.
And the only reason they did was because they knew like the talent level of they were like, hey, we have all these talented people. This isn't going to be the case 3 years from now. We got to do it this year. And it was 2014, which is right after the movie came out, which I still have never seen. My only experience with Les Mis is this production.
So, are you still in touch with any of those people today that were kind of in the actors in the theater group?
Yeah, yes, I am. One of them, who played Andras, the leader of the rebellion, he ended up being a composition major at Berkeley and then got his MBA at Boston University. So all of these kids grew up into just really exceptional artists
Mm.
and performers. Um, and I was lucky to be around that. So that particular person I am close friends with still. The other people I'm loosely connected to, and I feel like because it was a half year of my life, but because of that half year of my life, I could message any of them today and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about you," and like it was spark up a conversation.
Yeah. Well, there's something, it sounds like that whole experience was really impactful. And there's something about those formative years when like we have those moments that kind of are life changing that really stick with you. And it's where time is almost not so linear. It's like this experience was so impactful, it almost takes up like more brain space than maybe another year of your life might. So you went
Mhm.
on to film school, and then you kind of transitioned into like production as far as filmmaking, TV, directing. Did you always freelance or were you ever like employed by an establishment after college?
Well, after college, I did some freelancing, and then for about 2 months, I had a 9 to 5. I had two different 9 to 5s in the span of those 2 months, and it wasn't for me. And what had happened was, um, actually, let me take it back into the towards the end of college because it kind of sets it up. Um, One thing that I always liked being was like the younger person that the older people. Like I always went to the older people with more wisdom because I two things. One, I like being like the next hot young thing, like and like being somebody's prodigy. But the other thing was I always like learning from older people, and that's just what I've surrounded myself with from whether it's content that I watch or the people I surround myself with. So in college, the first kid to get like a paid gig, like a paid like reel where he was an assistant camera on a real Toyota commercial. He was flown to Atlanta. Like he was like I would say my mentor, one of my closest friends, and I lived with him. He was my roommate too, a year above me. And he comes back, and everyone thinks he's like a superstar and stuff like that. And I'm in his kitchen one day when he comes back, and he's like, "Dude, that this was nice and everything, but I feel like this career that we've chosen, um, we're gonna be like working until our graves because you can't make money as an artist." And I'm like hearing this from this kid that I was looking up to that got,
Whoa.
somebody paid for his hotel room, and like that was like Hollywood at the time. And I'm just like, yeah, no, that's not gonna be me. And I was always like fiscally responsible and learning to save and stuff like that at a young age. And um, I made it my mission to like not be that. I did not want to be like the starving broke Sundance filmmaker, film festival artist and stuff like that. I was like, if I'm going to make a career in this, I could like fund my passion projects.
Mhm.
So what I did was within 6 months after that, I was working so much that like I had already like 6 months after that conversation, I was on a plane to Tokyo to film a commercial for like a Sony project because like I just took that moment as motivation
Mhm.
and I just ran with it. After school, the momentum just I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was mindset, opportunity, or what. Boom, nothing. Like I was not working. I had a lot of work I graduated May, a lot of work in June, July, nothing. August, nothing. September, nothing. And I was like, whoa, what's going on here? I was like, okay, let's see if this 9 to 5 thing might work. There was the first one was a digital company in New York City. It was just like a content mill, like really cheap labor type of stuff. And I went with it because why not? And I got to experience it, and it was really cool. I actually really loved the job because even from day one, I wasn't the collaborative aspect felt like the high school media program I was in. Everyone was like together. There was no like um cringy authority type of thing. Like I felt like one of them right away. Then I get a message on LinkedIn by like a headhunter who was like, "Hey, here's this job that you might be a good fit for. Can you interview for it?" And the job was for like double the salary, health insurance, stuff like that. And it was based in New Jersey, so I didn't have to go into the city. I didn't have to take public transportation because it was by my house. I could drive there. Um, and I interview for it. It's fine, but it was like a corporate office videographer job. I could tell it's going to be soul sucking, but at the same time, like adult money versus like almost dependent on your parents, like as close to $15 an hour as you could get. Um, and so I take the offer letter to my then current boss, and I'm like, "Hey, I want to stay here. It would be irresponsible for me to like turn this down. Is there anything you could do?" And he said, "No." So I took the job, the corporate job, and I lasted like 4 weeks there. What had happened was on my third day, it was an office. It wasn't like public facing. I just had to go around like the factory and film videos and edit them and stuff like that. Because they were manufacturing trade show booths. And um, on the third day, it was like a summer, and I get an email from my boss like, "Hey, you can't wear shorts." And like I didn't wear like basketball shorts. I was dressed fine, but like I've never been told like a dress code in my life or anything I've ever done. So that was like really weird. And then I realized I'm like, oh, these people are just not wired like me. They think I'm probably this weird person because no, who has the gall to show up in an office with shorts?
Mhm.
But I did it because I just don't know any different.
Yeah, didn't think
And
twice,
then
but corporate America has its own agenda.
yeah, and it
Interesting.
was exactly. So I a bunch of things like that happened, and then I was kind of let go, mutually parting ways because I was being like resistant to things, and like I just wasn't happy there. I get into the parking lot and I call my best friend at the time, and I tell him what had happened. He's like, "Congratulations." I was like, "What are you gonna do now?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna call the union hall with the IATSE Local 52, which is like a electric a filmmaking union, and I'm gonna be like, "Do you guys have any work?" And luckily, I called. They called back in like 5 hours, and on the next day, I was working on a Netflix show, making more that day than I did in 3 days' work at the
Wow.
company. And so that,
Could you wear shorts to that
yeah,
Netflix
I
show?
wore shorts.
Nice.
Yeah,
You're like, "This is where I fit in. I can wear
yeah,
whatever I want."
that was my
Totally.
experience.
That's so interesting. So, I feel like in your story, there's a lot of kind of drive and ambition and just kind of motivation to keep it rolling even if things aren't working in your favor. Where do you think that comes from?
I think it comes from confidence, and confidence comes from having deeply held core beliefs that you stick by. And
Mm,
so I was always in a position where I would kind of like audit the opportunities or things in front of me, bad decisions, good decisions against my core beliefs, and did it, deviate. And because of that, I feel like I was never like succumb to like too many social pressures, and I kind of went my own way in terms of what I find to align with my values. And I think
Mm.
that's where it comes from.
Yeah, that's interesting because even like back in high school, when you were this football player, and then you're like having this experience viewing theater, and you're like, this is so cool. Like some kids, not you, but other kids might be too embarrassed to like actually pursue that avenue because that's not cool or that's not like that's not what football players do. So like you can't just be a theater kid, but it sounds like you're kind of like have this sense of independence where you just follow you and it doesn't really matter like the outside influences as much.
Yeah, because every every group of people is is cool. Like whether you're a theater kid or a photographer or a football player, like everyone has their own. It's the same social hierarchy within the group, and it just like and I was observant, and I liked observing these social hierarchies, and I was like, it's all the same, just different interests. And so I'm naturally gravitated towards what other people find interesting. And whether I'm talented at it or not, or just amused, I like hearing people either, I like seeing people either perform or hearing people talk about what they're interested in.
It kind of goes hand in hand with what you're doing now a little bit. Or reminds me of kind
Hmm.
of, I watched your bio video, I think it was like talking about what you do and telling stories, as how brands need to tell stories because it helps them connect with a group of people that feel identified to what that brand is about. So, like, when a brand tells their brand story, it's attracting the certain group of people. So, one brand might be telling a brand story that attracts football players. One brand might be telling one that attracts theater kids, but your ability to see that it's almost all the same thing. We just need to like find that line of kind of like identity on how to connect with groups. So it's interesting that you're able to, it seems like your skill set's very versatile in like who you're able to work with, or it doesn't necessarily matter what the story or the group is. It's more about the process of the storytelling.
I'm just an amplifier for somebody's story, whatever it is. I hold a microphone up to them, and then most people are just naturally good at sharing their story. But if they're not, I coach them through it, and we get to we get to a point where like they're comfortable to share their experiences and who they relate to. I think um, it's normal in a social setting and in a business setting for somebody to want to appeal to everyone. But my mindset is um, the less relevant you are to a majority of people, the more relevant you become to the right group of people. And I try to really reflect that in who I am and the work I put out there.
Mm-hmm. So it's like kind of furthering developing a niche is important.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, so a niche is important, but I would even say if you take like a horizontal person like Tim Ferriss, I wouldn't say Tim Ferriss necessarily fits into a niche. I don't really listen to Tim Ferriss, but he comes to mind because he's very horizontal. He's interested in a lot of things. And he recognizes that the people that listen to him are also multi-dimensional and like very interested in a lot of different things, whether it's health and mindset or I don't know, space or whatever else he talks about.
Boxing or
Um,
whatever, fighting.
the oh yeah, UFC and
I
MMA
have,
and stuff like that.
yeah.
Um, the name of my company is called Sondor Media, and it's derived from my favorite word, which is Sonder. My name is spelled Sondor, and the word Sonder is Sonder. And the word Sonder is the awareness that everyone you pass by on your day-to-day life is living an equally complex and unique and vivid life to your own. And just having that awareness changes how you engage with the world. And it's my favorite word.
Yeah. That's really cool. So, for somebody, because I feel like this is one of the things I ran into with storytelling in my brand is that I have multiple interests, like many interests. I'm a very curious person. I'm a Gemini, if you know astrology, just like kind of like all over the place with different fascinations of things. but my audience doesn't seem to always respond well when it's like getting too far outside the box of like nature art and like kind of my core themes of storytelling that I've carried along. So how do you, I guess there's almost a difference between like what Tim Ferriss is doing and he's got all these interests, but what he's really good at is also being super detail oriented and he like almost picks apart the details. Um,
Mhm.
how do you advise somebody that has almost like too much going on and like are you suggesting people become more narrow before they become more wide focused, or how would you kind of handle that?
It's very difficult for an artist or any creative person to become narrow because we like exploring. And we don't want to be confined in a box. Like I was in a cubicle and told I couldn't wear shorts. The thing is, and you probably noticed with your ability to excel in what you do with paintings and all the types of artwork you're doing, is that um, over time you you developed your own voice, and that voice is consistent. And to me, a brand is a promise and an expectation that the audience puts on you, that the next thing that they see from you is going to be consistent with what they've known you to be. So, as an artist, when you're struggling internally with, okay, I'm doing these murals and paintings. Okay, well now I want to do like cut glass mosaics, and are people going to respond well to that, or you want to do things out of I don't know, found items, sculptures and stuff like that. Are people going to respond to that? Um, they they might not at first, but I want to talk about the core feeling of what that is, of that boxed in feeling of like, oh, I only have to do painted murals. Um, to me, what that speaks to is this irrational fear that when you walk into a room and this is your life now, this is what you're doing, you feel like you're going to get trapped in this room and there's never going to be an exit. You're going to open that door, you're going to walk in that room, and now it's a prison cell. But what you find as you get better at what you do is that each room you walk into, now there's two more doors. And eventually you get the confidence within yourself to open and walk through another door. There's two more doors. And so each room you collect a new thing along your journey. And with the faster you could move through each door, the more velocity you take in, the more momentum you get, and eventually you get to this Tim Ferriss level, where he has a lot of wisdom and a lot of um, experiences to share.
Yeah.
And I believe that's what the best artists in the world do. They recognize that there's going to be another opportunity. Don't have analysis paralysis with what you're doing right now. Um, yeah, that's what I have to say to that. Did that answer your question? I don't know if
No,
I went
that
all
was
over, but
really
I think I came
interesting.
back.
I really
Okay,
like
good.
that metaphor of moving through rooms, and because it's almost like the evolution of a brand or an artist, whatever you want to call it. The evolution of an artist is if you also just keep doing the exact same thing in the same way, eventually you might tap out and bore your audience. So it's kind of
Hmm.
like there is a certain time at which walking through the doors might be important, or like to continue the exploration and the evolution of adding to that story of what an artist is, or even like the creativity, because I could see like it can get stale if you just keep doing the exact same thing.
But there's also the idea that you become more of a master. Like
Mm.
if you're the best person in the world at what you do and it's super specific, you'll never run out of work. There's Man, I wish I could just pull out of my head right now like an example, but like um there are people that do one thing and it's them and everyone else is the copycat.
Yeah.
And that's a great position to be. And then kind of like an author, you could create other pseudonyms or other names and offshoots of your brand, and you just experiment and grow that to the side if you want, and then bring it into your main collection if
Mhm.
if you want to. Um, but but yeah, that's important. And it's always it's important to, rather than having a like a finger or thumb on the pulse of what's trending, it's important to learn the direction that your tribe, your audience is going into, because that's more important, because what's trending is probably not what's relevant to your particular audience. At least I believe that.
Mm. So how would you go about figuring out where your audience is kind of heading?
Well, let's break that down. What's your audience to you
Oh,
right now?
okay. My audience is outdoor people that love to go outside. Um, Pretty heavily Pacific Northwest focus, but I'd say there's like kind of the national spread in terms of like different outdoorsy towns all over the nation. They like to ski, surf, hike, be outside with their dogs. Some of them really like to create art as well. Some of them are aspiring artists. How am I doing?
Perfect. Is it okay? It's a clear picture to me, because now I could think of like three different um, buyer personas, customer avatars, whatever you want to call
Right.
them,
Okay.
off
Yeah.
of that.
One thing I would add is like I think the reason people want to like buy my art or kind of identify with it is that since they identify with being outside, my art is very nature focused. So having it in their home is part of their identity because they're outdoorsy people.
That's exactly where I was going to go with it, and more specific to the Pacific Northwest. Either they're moving to Los Angeles or New York City for a job and they want to take a piece of home with them,
Hmm.
or they visited on vacation and want to bring it back home, or they're a native and they're proud and they want to represent that in their style at home. So those are three reasons beyond I just like art that somebody would buy art from you. And so now, with that in mind, whatever you create next, and it could be a different genre, but of art, it could be the glass mosaic thing, or recovered, um, found garbage turned to art. Whatever it is, if you keep that in spirit, it'll be successful, I
Hmm.
think.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting because you're right. It's like it's not just people that identify with living here. It's like because this place is kind of iconic on a national scale, people want to say, "Oh, I visited. This is a place that like I love going to. I'm going to go back." And that definitely makes a lot of sense. Cool. I like the way you broke
I
that down.
have not been to the Pacific Northwest. It's the one place I have not been to. I've been everywhere in the country except for Arizona, Grand Canyon, and the Pacific Northwest. So it's uh, I and the reason is because I want to dedicate time and energy to each place that I go to, so I get to like experience the entire region isolated and as a whole. So
Yeah. Well, it's definitely worth a visit and let's get you a project out here so you have a good excuse to come out.
for sure, I
um,
no, I was, when I went to like Yellowstone and the Tetons in Wyoming and stuff like that. I just went out with a friend one summer and we just slept in like hammocks and tents in grizzly bear country.
oh
Looking
my
back, it
God.
kind of feels crazy, but like at the same time, we were really careful. We were really prepared, and no sense, no nothing. So like we were set. But um, I'll have to go out to Washington and Oregon and that area. So
Yeah, there's a lot of van life out here, so a good van project would be good to do
there you
out.
go. Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. It's very heavy. Olympic Peninsula is very heavy to the van life. Um, did you have bear spray at least when you were in Wyoming and
Oh
Oregon?
yes, of
Okay,
course. Yes,
you
yes,
gotta
yes,
have that.
yes. And like it, we didn't even like we had like unscented soaps. We kept all our food just far away from us, safe. Like we were set. We had
Yeah.
one bear encounter on a hike, um, and it was a pretty populated area, actually. So there's a lot of foot traffic. There's this giant bear that on all four legs was up to my shoulders, and it was like it was a black bear, but it was giant and way bigger than what I've ever seen. And
Wow.
there are people on that hike with little kids and no bear spray and flip flops and jeans, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. And
Yeah.
like, what are you doing?
It's
So,
like, yeah, it's like Disneyland. Yellowstone can be like Disneyland. I went to school in Bozeman, Montana. So I'd go out to Yellowstone and
whoa,
camp. Yeah. And it could like the most grizzly bears I've ever seen are just from the inside of a car, like driving through Yellowstone. And then I saw like one time a grizzly bear, and then all this traffic was stopped, and people are like running, stop their cars in the middle of the road, running with their cameras trying to get a photo. It was the saddest thing I've ever seen. It's like people
that's
stay in your
scary.
cars, keep driving, let the wildlife be. So
Bozeman is a great city.
it is.
I loved Bozeman. I wanted to like live there, but I could also tell that it was very different 6 years ago.
Well,
Like
yeah.
it felt brand new and shiny.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, see, when I went there, I would have called it a town. It's now a city.
Yeah,
Um, it's really changed, I think, even since I left in 2016, and it's the valley's just kind of like boomed and grown, and it's changed a lot. It's really
I
getting heavily
I could
developed.
imagine it's difficult for the locals to be able to continue to afford there with like an influx of these migrants, essentially, like of like Los Angeles folks that are, moving to that area.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's really
mm,
true. It's happening in a lot of places, but I mean, there's lots of other spaces in Montana to live that are more open and less, developed, but
Billings, Billings was really shocking to me because it felt like a town, like a generic town in New Jersey, at least to me, and it
Mhm.
felt very crowded and strip mall after strip mall was the vibe I
Yeah.
got.
Yeah, it's kind of
Um,
like I think the history is very industrial.
okay, makes sense.
So like coal
Well,
mines and mining and all
East
that.
Coast influence. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Anyways, a little tangent there, Rocky Mountain tangent, but I want to go back to something you said before, in terms of your core values and how you kind of use your core values to discern whether maybe an opportunity is right for you, or even like a thought pattern, or like your next steps in life. What could you share a couple of your core values?
man, it's weird. I wonder how I could phrase them in pithy words because I guess I've never had to put them into words because I guess they're just feelings. And
Yeah.
okay, so it's feelings of inclusion. Like it's really important for me to feel like everyone feels a part of what's going on and not to feel like I'm excluding anyone. It's a really poor representation of what the feeling is because I guess I've never had to articulate it into words. Maybe I
Totally.
should. Maybe I should make a little manifesto and just like here's my four core values. But that would be one of them because I think I'm hyper aware of people's like feelings when I'm in their vicinity, and I want to make sure that they're comfortable. Um, Another core value is being a conscious consumer. It doesn't mean being like an anti-consumer or like anti-capitalist or anything like that. It means when you purchase something, purchase it with intention and don't do it because it brings you status. And to go off on the status thing, it's everything we do is for status to kind of like, and plays an important role in like social hierarchy and stuff like that. But people, after Maslow's hierarchies met, that's all we have is our status. So instead of buying a sweatshirt, we buy a sweatshirt with a logo that represents who we are, who our tribe is. We're Nike tribe. We're um, reigning champ tribe. We're this is Uniqlo, and it's a lot of people wear logos on their stuff to represent who they are, and that's kind of how like the relationship between brands and people are. And so for me, I want to return out to as closely to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs as I can, and like be influenced as little by the role of status.
Mhm.
If there's anything else, I think that's a good start.
When you're talking about consumption and consuming kind of products with intention. Would you also say that goes similarly to your consumption with media or your beliefs about consuming media? Because I feel like that's another method of how we consume now. And there's such an influx of information that if you're not intentional about where you're looking for that information or, just scrolling social media mindlessly, that can be kind of another way we're consuming. So what's your take on that?
It's really easy to allow like the doom scrolling to settle in and just kind of absorb without resistance everything that comes your way. And there's a certain level of discipline, which is I suffer from, everyone suffers from, that you need to practice in order to kind of like break out of that matrix, out of that, wait a second, like what social media is feeding me right now is what they want me to see, not what I'm actively seeking out. It's one reason why I don't really use TikTok. I don't have TikTok on my phone. I never look at Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts because I know I will be addicted to it. And I just don't need another addiction in my life. Like it's so easy for these companies to just hook you. And that's just like an artificial barrier I just put on. Like I just don't go on that stuff. In terms of other media, um, when I create like my own videos, I think one of the more popular topics that does well for me is the idea of breaking free from subscription services. And I'm not anti Netflix, anti Amazon and Hulu and stuff like that. I just kind of propose the question, um, are you getting what you think you're paying for? And if you're paying for convenience and you just want to flip channels and be served like brainless stuff, it's sure you could do that. But also like there's a lot of things that you can't get on these platforms anymore because they're just, I don't know, taking great pieces of media, great pieces of artwork, and putting them in a stash in terms and going the whole Tiger King route and just feeding a bunch of hot junk in the moment that might be popular. And then a flash in the pan, it's not relevant anymore. Um, and so one of my things is like, if you if you just recognize that and recognize what you're consuming, then you'll have like a better relationship with the time you spend consuming things and maybe even, well, definitely even with what you're consuming. And it might be able to inspire you or help you relax in better ways than just giving up onto a feed that serves you.
Mhm. And that takes a whole lot of self-awareness and self-control these days, especially when everyone around us, I mean, not everyone, but many people around us are consuming media, social media in that way of without any thought and just taking it for what it is and spending more and more hours on the screen. Where do you think the self-awareness piece comes from for you? Does that go back to your core values?
Yeah, yeah, it goes back to the core values because it's everyone needs like their internal belief system or internal Bible or guidebook or employee manual, whatever it is, to just kind of audit their decisions because, like, left unchecked, you could get influenced from anything and have your mind like lose its ability to critically think.
Do you think
Um,
that's happening to people now?
yeah, it happened 10 years ago, and so it's that's just how it is, and I feel like I like just asking questions, and it doesn't matter what side of the debate you're on. I always take the opposite side and I just ask questions because I just want somebody to like have to think hard about what it is they believe and be able to justify it and stand by it. And I like being questioned too because then it just makes me feel like, uh, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. Um, and um, it's you know, and especially with algorithms, because we're never met with that resistance because we're fed with what it is we want to see, we're losing that ability to question. We think we're questioning because um, they say, "Oh, look what this part of the government's doing," or "Look what." Oh, look. look what Disney's doing, or look what these different brands or organizations or influencers. It's easy for us to judge with and have an opinion on literally anything because we can headline read and it agrees with, yeah, that sounds about right in our monologue.
Yeah, it's like reinforcing kind of those beliefs. And I mean, I feel like that's part of the reason why almost our political system even is not to like go down a politics hole, but like why it's so polarized because we're getting fed these beliefs that just more and more align with, or these headlines that more and more align with our beliefs. So
Hmm.
it's kind of this
Hmm.
interesting dichotomy.
It's hard. It's a hard world to live in.
It is. So with Sonder Media, you're helping brands and your clients tell stories. Who is your ideal client?
Man, right now I work with two really primarily right now. I would say influencers on one end, but the other end that I've been loving to work with has been camper van builders, like people that build camper vans and those types of brands. I had the opportunity to work really closely with one for like most of last year in California, take out their product and go around the desert and do stuff. And my goal with that is really to help. Man, it's so difficult to stand out because people think standing out is putting out some flashy videos. But for me, it's it's like, hey, how could we humanize this brand and make it relevant to the right buyer instead of just anyone who's interested in a van? And so I help them really define their audience in a way that a person will take one look at them and be like, oh, okay, these are my people, or no, we're going to go to like Winnebago or another company. Um, and so that's what I've been focusing on.
Yeah. So with your work now, are you getting behind the camera or is it mainly kind of like strategy and consulting work?
It's both. I would say it's a mix of both because one is high level thinking and the other one is the execution of that direction. So for me, like setting a strategy means setting a goal, and um, the strategy is a bundle of sticks, which I call tactics, that you like test out against that strategy. So it's essentially creating a core belief of the brand. That's what the strategy is, and then you test. Okay, what words do we use? What videos do we make? What does the website look like? We test all of these little tactics that are interchangeable and see what fits in the belief system of the company and belief system of who they're trying to sell to. And that's what I've been doing, and it works pretty well, and it's really fun and rewarding.
So are you recommending like even if you're not kind of consuming Instagram reels or whatnot, are you recommending some companies based on their audience do use Instagram as a marketing technique, or are you pretty YouTube focused with that?
Um, Wherever the attention is,
Yeah.
that's working for them. So there are people that are doing really well on Instagram because they have big audiences. I'm not going to be like, oh, ditch that, focus on YouTube.
Hmm.
Um, it's what's working for them. And what I would say is, don't be on every platform. Pick one, stick with it, because it's really expensive in terms of money and time and resources and bandwidth to be relevant on all of them. Not everyone could be Tim Ferriss because Tim Ferriss spends a lot of money to be relevant on all of them. And so if you're just getting into it and you're kind of like dabbling on every platform, um, I would I would just focus there. On pick one that you could really stick to and build it out. Like for me, my two platforms is LinkedIn and Reddit, both text based, not even videos, because my audience isn't particularly video based. My personal brand is video based. So I have a YouTube channel for my personal brand, which is great. And with I'm following the Tim Ferriss idea of I'm having this personal brand be something entirely different from what my work is to kind of just show a well-roundedness, and it makes the work more attractive when there's a sort of human attached to the work, if that makes sense, instead of like, we make videos that'll get you money.
Hmm.
So
So you're also building out this personal brand. Congrats on 10K on YouTube.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. So is the purpose of that to connect with these potential clients that will hire you for kind of this type of what do you like brand strategy and production side of things, or is this a separate entity that you're building out for yourself?
It pretty much has nothing to do with me trying to make money from my other business. To me, it serves as a dear son or dear daughter. Like I'm speaking to like my future kid and
Mm.
trying to like challenge them.
Mhm.
Like, hey, here's a question, here's the question of the day. Here's some thoughts and research I did. Make up your own opinion on the matter. So literally what I could do, I don't particularly do this, is I'll film a video and I'll start it with um I like like dear son or daughter, and then I end with love dad, and I just cut those two off, and then the rest of the video is the same. And so to
Interesting.
me, it's just a personal diary of my thoughts and what I'm thinking at the current time and my perspective on it. And I learned that there's a lot of entrepreneurial burnout culture going on, especially post COVID. And I'm like, let's be the anti hustle culture. Let's live and have our businesses serve us instead of us being some slave to what arbitrary game are we playing? Who's this Gary Vaynerchuk guy telling us to go, go, go? What are we going for?
Yeah.
And that's the spirit of my personal brand, which I don't get to determine what my brand is. The audience does, and then whatever their perception of me is, therefore the brand.
Yeah. That's really cool. I mean, it also seems like a good creative outlet since you are such a creative person to be able to kind of have that full freedom of full creative freedom over the videos you're making. They're all really creative and interesting. And then it's basically you sharing your thoughts without, because client work can sometimes be like your focus is on making your client happy
Mm-hmm.
100%, not necessarily yourself. So this is a cool avenue of like balancing that. You just said that there's been a lot of creative entrepreneurial burnout post COVID. Why do you think that is?
Um, well, I graduated college in 2018, and that was like the height of this like digital entrepreneur boom, where everyone was like, it was a land grab, and everyone was like, hustle, hustle, hustle. COVID happened and people just stepped on the gas. And now you're seeing all these YouTubers quitting. It's like a biggest trend on YouTube in 2024. Everyone's quitting and everyone's talking about burnout. And here I am, and I'm like, oh, I could strike while the iron's hot because this is my entire identity, being this anti-hustle culture type of person where we question what is success and why are we pursuing it, and is it why are we pursuing the successes of others projected on us? Why don't we find our own um, core purpose? And that's what I think is going on today, because there's
Mhm.
a chasm between what the story that people were telling themselves is no longer relevant or true, and they haven't yet discovered what it is that they're looking for. So they're
Yeah,
lost in this limbo.
interesting. Well, I mean, that's interesting kind of in like my niche or industry with artists that have kind of grown on the internet and become full-time like because of their internet presence. There were I was one of like five that I was aware of artists at the time back in like 2016, 2017 on social media, back when you would just like post one photo with a weird filter. And
Mm-hmm.
so many more have joined the scene, which is awesome. Like there's so much art out there, but a lot of it is it's not reinventing the wheel. It's doing more of that type of art. And like people just trying to immediately sell their art and their products with their art on it. And now I'm in a place where I'm like, there's so much more competition than when I started. And I try not to let that get in my head. And a lot of it is just more of the same, I guess is what I'm saying. But like there's
Mm,
so many more artists selling their work on Instagram than when I started in like 7 years ago, and it's really interesting to see like how can like the industry or the niche really support this many of us, right? Like is there at a certain
mm,
point at which it caps? So it's a little bit different than YouTube, but in the same way as people's time, like you can only view so many YouTube videos in a day. You're only going to identify with like a couple YouTubers. You're not going to be watching like hundreds of YouTubers a day. So people are going to pick their favorites. But it's an interesting time we're in where with that people losing their jobs being like, okay, I'm going to pursue this avenue. And then now the economy is slowing down. Like nobody knows really what's going to happen.
I'll land the plane beautifully with this one
Okay.
because it's something I have a lot of thoughts about because in I've been making YouTube videos off and on and different trying to find my direction for like 14 years. Finally found it this year. In 2013, when I was making YouTube videos, I made one called "Is It Too Late to Get Big on YouTube?"
In
In
2013.
2013,
Wow.
because there was a guy named PewDiePie who had 6 million subscribers at the time, and I was like, "This is it." However, at the time, I opened the video as a 17-year-old talking about the composer Bach, who is, I'm getting this slightly wrong, but it's kind of on track. He's said, like, people say that he has composed pretty much every type of melody that you can like compose. Like he's done it. He's made every combination possible. And I say, okay, if that's technically true, why is there new music coming out? Because it's reinventing what what was older, and it's now becoming relevant to a new thing. And so you have each artist that comes on Instagram or whatever next platform there is, you have these people um, that are bringing something that there wasn't before, but there's in two ways: one creatively and inspirationally, but two audience wise. The audience in 2013 on YouTube was extremely different than it is in 2024. And it's a new set of eyeballs and a new set of ways for people to grow. I believe the more artists there are on a given platform, the more opportunity it is for you to be discovered. Because, like I said at the start, you're going to be irrelevant to 90% of people, but there's a 10% of people that are going to love Pacific Northwest art. They're going to love what you stand for. I even complimented a specific piece because I'm like, that piece, that one speaks to me. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's tons of people out there like me, like you, and more people creating just means more opportunity to discover where you fit in on this planet, and hopefully eventually that means that everyone is going to once again feel like included, and it's going to lead to a better place. But we'll see about that.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really cool way of looking at it. And you're right that it does just get almost like more and more defined of like your specific talent. Like if you're trying to be too many things at once as a creator on the internet, you're kind of losing everyone at the same time. Like you're not really connecting with anyone. So it's like, how can you connect with that specific group of people, which is kind of what you've been getting at through this whole
Mm-hmm.
conversation.
Right, right. Yeah, it's just finding that connection point, and the more people creating, the more opportunity it is for them to discover you too, because they might discover you through being exposed to that other creator.
Mm-hmm. Totally. What can we expect to see from you in the future?
I would say doubling down on my YouTube channel because I think it's working. I finally figured out a mix between what I love doing, what I can be consistent about, and what people are responding to.
Mm,
And I just got to add gasoline to that fire. So it's
mhm.
literally just going to be that. That's
Yeah.
my focus.
Yeah. That's awesome. Do you think you finding out what your audience is into and then also what you like to do is a combination of a lot of experimenting to figure out what that is and what connects with that group of people?
Yeah, it's just constant experimentation. And there's a Venn diagram you have to draw between what people want and what you want, and then in the middle is your unique value proposition and what you have to contribute to the world. And so that middle of the Venn diagram, I finally found that. Took a while, but I found it.
Yeah. And what would you call it?
Videos about living with intention and exploring the departure of a conventional lifestyle.
Awesome. No, they're really creative. And I've
Thank
watched a
you.
couple of them. I did watch the one about YouTubers losing their influence and or losing their relevance. So
Hmm.
that was a good one too.
That's one of my favorite ones. So,
That must have taken a lot of time. How long do these things take you to edit? Are you editing them all yourself?
um, so that one in particular, and there's another one that I filmed a long time ago, and I spent way like an unsustainable amount of hours on. Um, then I'm now learning how to create things that's like an 80-20, where it's like the right amount of hours and the right amount of like attention on it and the right amount of like fulfillment for me. And I'm getting better at that, but I still need to practice.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll definitely link your YouTube in the description of everything. And then final question, what do you normally do on a typical Sunday?
I spend a lot of time cooking on Sundays because it allow like if I don't have to think there okay, this ties back to the core belief. I don't like eating out. Even though today I got a lox bagel. So like there's exception days, but on a Sunday I prepare to make the rest of my week easier. So whether it's cut up vegetables, putting in bag, cook rice, freeze them in something in the freeze, I make things easy. So I have like almost microwavable food for the week just so that um I can like I can if I do something for my future self, I know it's gonna reap a reward. So that's my Sundays are basically that. And
Yeah.
then I would say at night I'll watch a movie and just relax. That's my
Yeah.
Sundays.
Nice. Love that. Yeah, you got to like fuel up and meal plan for the week ahead. I feel like when I was younger, I never planned any of my food and I was always starving or not feeling good after I ate something like quickly, but the being an entrepreneur takes self-care and you have to fuel your body and your mind with good food. So, love that you're doing that on a Sunday. Are you typically
Right.
working like kind of Monday through Fridays with your job?
I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
I It depends. Like yesterday, I just pretty much burned myself out to meet a deadline. Like that's another thing. I don't miss deadlines. I say it's going to be done a day, like no matter what, it's done. Um, Today I have like this podcast, this opportunity to be on your platform, and I'm meeting with my business coach, and talking to a few people for the first time this afternoon, which is great.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, and yeah, so it varies from day to day.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you're not working that 9 to 5 in that suit and slacks, you got your shorts on, you are making your own schedule and making it happen. So, Chris, it's been really fascinating hearing all of your thoughts. I feel like I got a little bit of consulting, strategy planning for my own brand, which was definitely really interesting. And just the story and the motivation and drive of how you've got to where you are was really interesting to hear. So, thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything.
Oh, thank you so much. Let's do it again sometime. I'm happy to talk anytime about content strategy and how artists can grow. That's my favorite thing.
Definitely. Bye, Chris.
All right, we'll see you.
Thank you.